Yeah.
There wasn't much more to be said, really.
Yeah. Right. So, yeah. Can you start off just by telling us a little bit about the situation with the banana industry and the unions in Colombia and the situation that they're facing, a bit of the sort of historical context and the current context of the political situation in Colombia?
Right, okay. So Sintra and Agro, with whom GMB have worked for probably more than 20 years now, are arguably the strongest banana workers union in Latin America. In fact, they may well be the strongest in the world. They now have over 22,000 members working under one collective bargaining agreement in Colombia, and they have over 34,000 members in total in other agricultural sectors such as flowers and palm oil. This is a remarkable achievement given the history of banana cultivation in Colombia. In fact, we can go back 100 years ago when United Fruit were in Colombia to see there was a massacre in a place called Ciénaga near Santa Marta, when over 1,000 workers some with their wives and children were massacred after they went on strike for better conditions. And the conditions were absolutely appalling in the banana industry. In fact, for most of the 20th century. And one of the key factors that stopped unions organising, apart from the outright repression, was the fact that the workers had to live on the plantations. They lived in squalid living quarters on the plantations. And so Sintra and Agro, when they came into being in 1989, one of the things they realised they had to do was get the workers out of the plantations into alternative accommodation before they had any chance really of organisation. And Sintra and Agro itself came from a merger of three unions, and they call themselves Sintra and Agro because they took the name from another union that had legal jurisdiction in Colombia, because they didn't. In fact, they were on the way to getting it, but it was taken away from them after a dispute. But to cut a long story short, since their formation in 1989, Sintra and Agro have been through a period of great turmoil. They were in the middle of a what can only be described as a war, really, between the FARC guerrillas and the EPL guerrillas. And since their formation, they've had 1,300 of their members killed in various conflicts. At one point, the employers would settle industrial disputes by getting paramilitaries to simply kill their members. But at some point, I think both sides realised that this couldn't go on, and there is now, and they embarked on a period of negotiations rather than killing each other, to put it crudely, which brings us up to the present day and the collective bargain agreement with the 22,000 members. The banana industry in general in Latin America is in a fairly fragile state, not least because there's overproduction of bananas. There are now significant plantations in Africa. Now, Colombian bananas, because their workers are paid relatively well, are amongst the most expensive. So the industry realises that it has to keep the unions on board to a certain extent to have a viable industry. They cannot afford the disruption that occurs through industrial disputes. That's not to say that Sintra and Agro don't have disputes with the employers. The Employers Association, Algura, a couple of years ago they were on strike for 67 days in pursuit of their pay claims. But there's certainly a more mature system of industrial relations now, and Sintra and Agro have extended their bargaining into what they call social unionism, and they've established decent living quarters for a lot of their members, state-of-the-art medical facilities in Apartado, one of the regional capitals, and so they've broadened their scope, which has been very successful in attracting workers to the union. But problems there still are. The leaders have been the victims of assassination attempts, and when I was there a couple of weeks ago, a worker was killed in circumstances which aren't yet clear. And also, a couple of months ago now, in a case of bananas destined for Spain, some drugs were found, which, as will be appreciated, of course, considerable problems. So it's not all plain sailing, and nobody says that monocultivation of bananas is a particularly good thing anyway. But in the context of the banana industry in Latin America in general, they are relatively well off, and Sintra and Agro members are able to enjoy a fairly decent standard of living.